Thank you for joining us for this episode of our In Conversation series. The aim of the series is to provide an insight on topical issues relevant to higher education from a university perspective. This is part of our Discover University programme. We encourage you to follow our Twitter handle at DiscoverUniEXE, which provides regular updates for teachers and advisors. My name is Karl and Katherine. I'm the school's relationship manager. I'm joined today by Catherine Lloyd-Clark, who's the Assistant Director with responsibility for student access, recruitment and admissions.
Hi, Karl.
Hello, Catherine. Today we're going to be looking at the admissions challenges currently facing students who are thinking of applying for 2021. So, Catherine, I wanted to start off by looking at whether we can foresee any major changes to the UCAS timeline in relation to how we handle applications.
Okay, Karl. Well, certainly it's been a rather different admission cycle for us at the university so far, in that there is more uncertainty. But as of today, as of the day that we're speaking to today, UCAS hasn't announced any changes to the application deadline, which currently still stands at the 15th of January. It's possible that there could be some small changes around dates and deadlines. There is discussion about that going on between university schools and UCAS, but no clear consensus at the moment. My guess would be that if there is a shift, it might just be a small change, for example, to move the 15th of January equal consideration date back to the 30th or 31st of January. But we'll have to wait and see what's announced. So I would imagine that there would be an announcement very soon if that is going to happen. And we'll have to go from there. That would probably then have a knock-on effect on the dates at which students would have to reply to the offers that they've received. And as people will remember, last year those dates did move back, so people had until June to reply to their offers. We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, so I guess it's a little bit of waiting for UCAS to announce those changes, if there are going to be any changes coming through, and then we change our approach, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah.
I wonder whether we can talk a little bit at the moment about how we're going to be handling our offers in the 2021-22 cycle for this year. So how are we going to handle those, making those offers?
So Exeter has been busy making offers, and we have been getting those out, and I hope that some of your students have been lucky and received offers from us already. But in all honesty, we have been pacing ourselves a little bit more carefully with our offer making for 2021, because we appreciate that there is still some uncertainty around the examination process for 2021. We know that the government in England has said that exams will go ahead. But if for any reason that were not to be the case, it would, as it did last year, have a major impact on our admission strategy. So we're being a little bit cautious at the moment and not releasing all of our offers quite as quickly as we normally would. So it will depend, as always, on the discipline that your students have applied for, because it's always the case that some disciplines make offers more quickly than others. But generally speaking, we are going a little bit more cautiously. We will be reviewing that position as we go along really frequently. We have a really good look at it every week to see if we can release some more offers. And we're not deliberately trying to hold back on students. We appreciate that they're desperate to hear, but we do have to balance things from a capacity point of view at the university as well. I think the area possibly where there has been the biggest change so far would be medicine. And I'm not sure if you want to talk a little bit more about that, Karl?
Yep, sure.
So applications for medicine this year have really been quite challenging for people. Two things have been at work within the Exeter admissions process. And I am speaking specifically for Exeter here. One of those elements was that, of course, we did have about 50 more applications from candidates who had received centre assessed grades last year and are coming around the UCAS loop again with their results in the bag. And that has boosted demand for medicine places. But a bigger factor for Exeter was really that we have enabled more students to qualify for an interview for medicine under our contextual admissions policy. And that has meant that we've not been able to invite as many students as we would who have predicted grades rather than achieved grades. It's a complicated picture. We have invited over 700 students to interview, but the interview slots have been under more competitive pressure than ever before. So we have had to disappoint an awful lot of people, for which we're really, really sorry.
And Katherine, you mentioned there that we've invited about 700 students for interview. Just to clarify for the audience, how many places do we normally on average have every year?
So there are over 200 in total for medicine. So we're giving a good opportunity there for people in relation to the number of places available. But it does remain the case that applications for medicine are immensely competitive in any year. But in this year in particular, we've not been able to really make offers down the tiers or rankings that we use to such a degree as we normally would. And the UCAT cutoff to achieve an interview has been exceptionally high this year. And that's what's behind, the disappointment that we know many, many students and schools and advisors have experienced, because we've really, outside of the contextual admissions widening participation candidates, we've really only been able to offer interviews mainly to candidates who've already achieved 3A stars or equivalent. So even candidates who've been predicted a number of A stars have not been given an interview slot. So it really is an immensely competitive process. The one encouraging thing I can say is that we are very open-minded to second applications. So candidates who are prepared to consider a gap year and apply again for medicine may well find that the situation eases somewhat next year. Obviously, I can't guarantee that, but we are very open-minded to second applications.
Thank you, Katherine. You mentioned there a little bit about contextual offers, which I want to touch upon in a second. But going back to the way that we're handling offers for all our courses, is there, I guess, a time frame by which teachers should expect to see the majority of our offers coming out? So is this, and obviously, I guess this will be post the January deadline, whenever that is, but is there a point in the cycle where we should have got out the bulk, the majority of our offers?
Yeah, well, we're still working to the usual end of March deadline for that. So we always endeavour to get all of our offers that are from on-time applicants dealt with by that date at the end of March. And I think we will continue to work towards that, even if it were the case that the UCAS dates and deadlines shifted back. We have really great capacity within the team to get those offers out. That isn't a barrier. It's really just making sure that we are really being cautious in terms of our numbers management, which I appreciate, isn't the primary concern of schools and colleges, but it is an important factor for the student experience that we make sure that we have the right number of students on our courses, because if we do have too many, it can negatively impact on the student experience. So we're just trying to be sensible in a very uncertain world.
Okay. Now, you mentioned a little bit about contextual offers and in reference to medicine, but obviously contextual offers are offered across a broad range of disciplines and subjects. Can you talk to us a little bit about what these things are, what are contextual offers, and more specific about eligibility for contextual offers? Who's eligible for them?
Yes, so I think the first thing to say here is that Exeter is hugely committed to having a diverse student body that's representative of all the different backgrounds and types of upbringing, if you like, that students have had across the UK. So we feel that it's really, really important that students learn with other students who may not have had the same experiences in life to date as they've had, because we all learn from each other where we encounter, different experiences, sometimes, different sorts of values or backgrounds. That's just a really important factor for us. So to help us achieve that, like in common with many selective universities and non-selective, we run a contextual admissions policy. And what that means is that we may make offers at slightly lower grades to candidates who meet certain eligibility criteria. Those criteria relate to themselves and their own background, but also to where they live and the type of school that they go to. And principally, in terms of where they live, the factors are derived from data on the number of young people that traditionally participate in higher education within that ward or postcode area. So that information is derived from the postcode. The data set is called the Polar 4 data set, and we count students who come from the lowest quintiles 1 and 2 as eligible for a contextual offer. So those will be students who are coming from postcodes where not very many people typically go on to higher education. Then we also, in terms of the individual themselves, we're very passionate about giving opportunity to care experienced and care leaving students. So there are some specific criteria relating to that, which you can see on our website. But students who have had a recent experience of the care system will be eligible for a contextual offer. And also students who've participated in one of our own Exeter progression schemes, for example, Exeter Scholars, would also be eligible potentially for a contextual offer. And in terms of the school, we're really looking at state schools where there is a significant proportion of the student population who come from what we would call an IMD background. IMD stands for Index of Multiple Deprivation. And again, it's a nationally derived data set. And it focuses on those areas, if you like, where students are most likely to have had significant socioeconomic disadvantage. So where the school has a significant proportion of those, then they will qualify for a contextual offer based on that type of school attendance. So we are putting a list of those schools up on our website so that people can easily see if they attend a qualifying school. So that's our approach, and I appreciate it's complicated. So do have a look at the contextual admissions information in our admissions policy and on our website for more information.
And in relation to teachers and advisors, do they need to flag any of these circumstances on the student application form in order for the student to get a contextual offer?
That's a really good question, Karl, and I should have mentioned that no, we are able to derive that information from what is put into the UCAS application. So there's nothing that the teachers and advisors specifically need to do. Oftentimes, schools do give us a little bit of information at the top of the reference about the particular context of their school, and that's very helpful. And of course, the reference is a good place to add or flag any particular issue that you think we really should know about in relation to the performance of that particular candidate. So that might, for example, be, a very significant factor in the family background that has affected performance, and is relevant really to the student's potential. Perhaps, for example, something happened around the GCSEs, and the GCSEs might not be as strong as the school would have expected, all other things being equal. So we're very open to seeing that sort of information included in the reference as well.
Okay. Now, you mentioned the teacher reference there, and I guess one of the questions that's now coming up quite often is how much should teachers make a reference to the COVID situation in their reference themselves? Do they need to put particular circumstances about what's happened or the impact COVID has had on teaching and learning within their school? Or will we, as a university, how will we handle this?
That's another very good question, and a very topical question, Karl, because we've noted the announcement very recently from the University of Birmingham that they plan to offer up to a grade of flexibility in respect of mitigation for the COVID pandemic for 2021 admissions. Now, my view at the moment is that it's the responsibility of the examination boards to come up with a fair and an even approach to this nationally. Now, I appreciate that's no mean task. There are lots and lots of different qualification types. There are lots and lots of different exam boards. But it's very important, I think, that we don't introduce further levels of subjectivity into our admissions decision making because of COVID. We're very mindful of being as fair as possible to everyone. I think if I were a head teacher or a senior teacher or a director of guidance at a school that had been very badly affected by COVID and had seen a lot of disruption or lack of attendance within year 13 or during year 12, if that's relevant, I would be inclined to include a line or two on that in the reference. I think that would be prudent, that would be sensible. But I can't at this stage guarantee that we would be offering a blanket reduction of grades in that context. We're going to wait and see what happens in terms of the examination board's approach and the examination board's policies with regard to mitigation.
Okay, that's very helpful. Let's move on to work experience. You were talking earlier about medicine students for whom this could be quite relevant, but also for a lot of other subjects and disciplines that we offer. In the past, we may have looked favourably towards students who brought with them or indicated at the point of application that they've had some experience, some engagement with some work experience, employers prior to actually coming onto university, coming and engaging with their degree course. Obviously, that's been quite restrictive over the last few months, if not close to impossible, to do the same and replicate exactly the same opportunities. So what advice can we give both to those students and to teachers and advisors in relation to what opportunities students can obtain instead of the traditional work experience? And will, if they don't bring any work experience to the table when they apply, will that stand against them?
Okay, so there's quite a lot to unpack there, Karl. I would say, first of all, that, we all understand how different the last year has been for everyone. And it's, the last thing we're going to do is to maintain unreasonable expectations that candidates, simply can't meet because opportunities haven't been available to them. So, that's almost a given. The second thing I would say is that I think actually applicants themselves and sometimes schools, colleges and advisors overemphasize the importance of work experience. Let's leave medicine and the more vocational programs out of things for a minute. But if you're applying for a subject, you know, like history, for example, or economics, it is not essential that you have relevant work experience in that sort of area, or indeed at all. What is important is that you are able to demonstrate your motivation and your passion for the subject you want to study. And sometimes work experience can be part of that. So, for example, even though it's not a requirement to have work experience for a business program, many students who are interested in studying business at university are already quite entrepreneurial people, and they might have been involved, you know, very actively in a mini startup at school or college, or indeed in things like young enterprise. And they might indeed have, you know, held down a very regular job where they've been reflecting on how that workplace operates, you know, commercially or in terms of its organizational design, and have very interesting things to say about that. And of course, those things are very positive, but they're not essential. So my point would be that it's the reflection and the wider engagement with the subject that's important. And that could be demonstrated in other ways than work experience. For example, by very broad reading, by strong engagement with, you know, the quality end of the national press, or with relevant journals. So that's really how I would approach that. For medicine, of course, it is different in that there are, you know, really quite clear expectations in relation to work experience, but we are being really quite flexible about that in the present environment. And, you know, nobody expects that you will have been able to be going in and out of care homes for the last 6 months, you know, experiencing them. So it's really about awareness of NHS values and ensuring that you can demonstrate your awareness of the practical realities of being in the caring professions. And that might come from, you know, around, from, you know, conversations online with medical professionals, you know, and with engagement in clubs and societies that may still be running in your school and college.
Okay, thank you. That's really sort of helpful and reassuring to hear that there are alternatives and opportunities out there. The next question I have is about study abroad and industrial placements, and there is some concern that obviously the current world we're operating in at the present hasn't got that many opportunities for students to be able to engage in study abroad opportunities. Travel and wanted to go to other countries could be difficult, and in terms of industrial placements, there may be less at present as a result of not wanting to have extra employees on site, or whether even some companies are operating in the locations, or whether many people are working from home. So do we have a sort of indication on whether these opportunities in relation to the courses that we offer, whether they have been reduced, or are we operating these differently?
At the moment, we are sincerely hoping that by the time the 2021 applicants are thinking of going on a year abroad or a work placement experience, things will be much more back to some kind of normal. And obviously, we can be a little bit more positive about that right now than perhaps we were even 8 weeks ago, because of the news nationally and internationally about vaccines. However, it is the case that it looks as though applications for those types of programs have been a little bit impacted by COVID. Study abroad in particular has seen a little bit of a fall in demand, because I think people are unwilling to necessarily commit to something that is that little bit more uncertain. It can be difficult to switch onto a study abroad program at a later date, but clearly there is some potential that may be possible in certain limited circumstances. Industrial placement's been less affected, and indeed in some areas, clearly people are thinking, perhaps worrying about the longer term future of employability and thinking that getting onto an industrial experience programme will give them a bit of a leg up and an introduction to employers. So that's not been so impacted like the study abroad has been. Personally, I would feel quite positive at this point because of the vaccines, that study abroad will recover to some kind of normal. But we do have some mitigation plans in place, if that isn't the case, to enable people to participate through technology in some learning experiences in other parts of the world.
I'm guessing, Catherine, on that, if a student, and I'm thinking of our audience at the moment, teachers and advisors, so if a student indicates that they would be willing and wanting to include study abroad as one of their options as part of the degree programme, it is easier to be able to, if the world hasn't changed in 2 or 3 years' time, it'd be easier to withdraw from that element than to try to step into it. So
much easier.
Okay, so in terms of the advice, if a student has got that inclination to include a study abroad element as part of their degree programme, they should really think of applying for it now, and then if in 2 or 3 years' time that the decision has changed, then look, there's scope to be able to change that.
I would say definitely try and do it that way around if you really feel you can. It's not just easier from the university side of things to change out of study abroad than to change into it. It's also for things like student finance, because in terms of the planning and the process for that, obviously you're adding an extra year of study with all of that, all of the implications of that. So it's definitely easier to do it that way round.
Okay, that's helpful. Now, I want to finish off with my last question, which is dealing with a possible misconception that may exist. Is it correct that there are less spaces available on courses this year as a result of an increase in students who deferred from last year? So do we have less spaces?
So for Exeter, the answer is definitely no. There hasn't been that kind of impact, with the exception of the medicine situation I've already explained. We have only really been able to see that medicine situation unfolding over the last, 2 to 3 weeks. It's not something that we anticipated, and the major element of it is not because of COVID and people who already have A-level results from last year. It's the contextual offer element that's much bigger in the medicine context. So, but for everything else, whilst we do have more students who have deferred in the system, that is not going to reduce the number of offers that we can make. What it might do, and this is a big might, because we tend to have a good degree of numbers flexibility in the summer, but what it could mean is that we maybe are not quite able to confirm quite as many places for candidates who miss the terms of their offer in the summer. So that's where we will see the adjustment if we need to make it. It's not that we will reduce the number of offers we make because of COVID. It's that we would adjust the number of places we confirm where people have missed the conditions of their offer in the summer. There are courses which are in very high demand at Exeter, such as law, where we will be adjusting the number of offers we can make downwards, because we've seen a huge surge in application volume, and the conversion of those applications over the last year or two has been really, really strong. But that's the normal process that we undertake in any year to adjust our offer tactics according to the patterns of demand. That's not a COVID impact.
Okay, thank you. Catherine, as always, thank you very much for your insight into the admissions scenario at present. This was a special in Conversation episode that we've run, particularly to focus on these issues. We'll be back later in the year, so we'll be providing a more sort of scheduled series throughout the forthcoming months as we approach the results day. But thank you for joining us. Please do follow us on Twitter at Discover Uni EXE, where we'll provide you with further updates on future sessions. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.